Abigail with Pinkstone Threads, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make this lovely basket weave scarf. So for this scarf, I used Ling yarns in Frida, colorway 1078 lot 4661. I really like this yarn. Obviously it has a lot of color variations, but I do think it really helps this stitching motif pop. So what we're going to be doing today is kind of going over the basics of how to do a basket weave stitching motif. You can really insert this into any basic pattern and do quite a bit with it. It's just a technique that can kind of be swapped out for any regular stitch or stockinette sections in other projects. But the basket weave really looks nice in a scarf like this. So we'll kind of go over the basics today of how to do this and how to make this scarf. So the way that this is knit is we started with 3 garter stitches. Then we alternate between doing 5 purls, 5 knits, 5 purls, 5 knits, 5 purls, and end with garter. And then once we have stacked 5 rows in that pattern, we will switch to doing 5 stockinette, 5 purl, 5 stockinette, 5 purl, 5 stockinette. Now because this is knit flat, your stitching pattern is going to change with each side. So for instance, with this purple section, you can see it starts with purl, ends with purl, but on the other side, it starts with stockinette and ends with stockinette. So the reason for that is that we are really taking advantage of the right and wrong sides to our knitting. So that means that when I started this row, I started 5 purl, 5 knit, 5 purl, 5 knit, 5 purl, did my 3 garter, and then once I flipped over to the other side, I did my 3 garter, and then instead of starting with purl, I started with stockinette, purl, stockinette, purl, stockinette. So it seems complicated to start, but once you start getting, a few rows in, you'll really start to notice the pattern developing. So I knit this to 60 inches, although you can definitely knit your scarf as long as you want. And the reason that we do have these garter tabs on the sides is just because we're using stockinette in this, and it can tend to curl up in on itself. And so just to have it lay flat a bit better, we do have those garter tabs on the side. Although that is optional, you could do without and have that kind of curled edges if you prefer. So some things to note as you're starting this pattern. This is a great pattern to start to learn to read your knitting. But some things to note for beginners is that on this pattern, your purl stitches are going to pop out and your stockinette stitches are going to kind of cave in on themselves. And your purl stitches are going to look like these loops here, and your stockinette stitches are going to look like these V's. So this is a really good opportunity to learn the difference between purls and stockinette and be able to read that within your work. But let's go ahead and get started. So for this example, I'm just going to be using a regular acrylic worsted weight yarn. So I'm going to be doing longtail cast on method. And I'm just going to briefly go over it here, but I'll link a more in-depth video. So you're going to want to start holding your yarn this way as kind of a triangle between your thumb and your forefinger. You insert your needle in between those fingers and you'll pick up that yarn, then take the tip of your needle, go towards the crevice of your thumb and pick up that yarn, and then go towards your index finger, draw the tip of your needle down your index finger to pick up that yarn and bring it through by your thumb and let those stitches drop. So you'll notice that gave us 2 stitches. It will be 1 from now on, and we're already in that middle section. So from here on out, you'll just go to that crevice of your thumb, down your forefinger, and back towards your thumb. Okay, so I've went ahead and cast on 21 stitches just for this example. So I'm gonna have 3 sets of 5 and then the 3 stitches on either side for my garter tab. So I have my 21 stitches and we'll go ahead and start working into it. So no matter what, with your first 3 stitches, you're just going to knit them, and your last 3 as well. And if you're kind of hesitant or having trouble with visualizing, I would use stitch markers to kind of help yourself out. If you don't have stitch markers, you can just use a scrap piece of yarn, set it in between those stitches, and that can help you kind of remember where you are within your work. So I would suggest doing that after your 3 stitches and after each of your 5 stitches for your sets. So for this one, I'm gonna go ahead and start with stockinette. I'm gonna do 5 stockinette stitches. So I've done my 5 stockinette stitches, and if you needed to, you can go ahead and add another piece of yarn there. And this is where I'm gonna switch to my purls. So now I've done 5 purl stitches, and you can start to notice that you're developing a difference here. If you pull down on your stitches, you can see that you have 5 V's to start with, and then you have 5 purl bumps. So you can start to see the pattern kind of separating out these different sections. So I'm going to go ahead and do 5 more stockinette, and then I'll do my 3 garter, and then I will switch sides of my work. So now I've completed all those stitches, so I'm going to go ahead and turn sides of my work, and you'll notice that the V's and the purl bumps are different on this side, and we are going to follow our knitting and do purls above the purl bumps, knit stitches above the V's, and purls above the purl bumps. So you're doing the opposite of what you did on the other side. So again, start with your 3 knit stitches, 5 purl, five knit stitches, and 5 purl, and then at the very end, you'll do your 3 garter. And to keep using that little scrap of yarn, you'll just take one of the ends and wrap it over the stitch to continue to mark your place up. Now, if you spread out your stitches, you can really see things are starting to develop. Go ahead and turn your work. And now we are back to starting with stockinette. So you'll do your 3 garter stitches. Then your 5 stockinette stitches. Five purl. And 5 knit. And then again, you'll just end with your 3 garter stitches. I will say I'm probably using far too grippy of a yarn for wooden needles. So the more grip that your yarn has, the smoother needles you're going to want to help it slide along your needles faster. So this yarn is a pretty grippy yarn and would be better with metal needles. I'll also say for this, I probably used far too small of a needle for this thickness of yarn. So those are things to keep in mind as you're starting your project. Kind of test your gauge. If things don't feel right, then it's not you. It is the tools that you're working with. So I'll go ahead and continue on with what I have just for the tutorial purpose. But always keep in mind, if things are getting too tricky or too hard, it's likely not you. It could be definitely the tools that you are using. All right, so to continue on, we'll start again, 3 garter stitches, no matter what. Then look at what you have on your needles. I have 5 purl bumps, so I'll continue on with my purling. Then knit stitches, so 5 knit. And 5 purl. Then you end with your garter. So at this point we have 4 rows. So we're gonna do 1 more row and then we will go ahead and switch our motif. So the way you can count your rows is by going along vertically your stockinette stitches, and you can count the V's. So I have 1 V there, 2, 3, 4. So I can tell that I'll just need 1 more row to have a full 5 rows. So go ahead and turn my work. Three garter. And if you're using yarn scraps, again, just pull them up as you go and pull over your stitches. So on this side, I have 5 stockinette. Five purl. Five stockinette and end with my garter. So one tricky thing about this pattern is that you're gonna get in the zone and you are going to just stockinette all the way across at some point, most likely, once you are in the zone. And so this is also a good opportunity to pick back your work. So say for instance, I accidentally just did this entire row in stockinette, which is likely to happen if you're doing something else. The way that you can pick back your work is to insert into the stitch below what is on your needle. Pick it up and let the stitch on your active needle drop. Insert into the stitch below your needle, let the stitch on your needle drop. So that's a really useful technique to know how to do, and I think this stitch pattern really gives you that opportunity to learn how to redo your work when you accidentally get in the zone and do the wrong stitches. Alrighty, so I have my 5 V's. I'm happy and content with where I am at with those blocks. They're nice and square with the yarn that I'm using. So at this point, this is when you are going to switch it up. So go ahead and start with your 3 garter. And then I have 5 purl bumps on here, but I am wanting to develop this stockinette block above it. So I'm actually going to do 5 stockinette. Now I have 5 stockinette stitches, and I'm going to switch those over to purl. Five purl again, so I'll switch those to stockinette. And no matter what, I'll always have those 3 garters to come home to. And these can be pesky to forget, so that's why I like to use that stitch marker just to remember them. All right, and so now on this side, we can see that we've developed our stitches onto this side. So we now have the 5 purl bumps above those stockinette stitches. We have the 5 stockinette, the V's above the purl bumps, and again, purl bumps above our stockinette. So we've already set ourselves up, and so now we can just continue on with that pattern. So 3 garter, then I have 5 purls, so we can see that new purl section developing over our stockinette section. New stockinette section over the purl section. And again, you saw me get kind of confused. So it's just really, it's almost meditative, but it's really having to be conscious of what you're doing as you kind of develop this. So you have to pay attention to what you're doing, but you also get in the zone. So I really find it to be like almost a very challenging meditation. So we see our new sections are really developing on this side, and we will just continue on until we have our 5 rows. So stockinette, 5, and I'm reading my work as I go, so I can see that I'm over those V's, so that means a knit stitch. Purl bumps, so switch to purl. And you're gonna be kind of counting in your head as you go along to make sure you get those 5 stitches. But if you ever forget, read your work, see what the stitch is below, and continue on with that. So I can see a V, so that is a stockinette stitch, and I'll do 5 of those. So let's go ahead and look at our work. You can really see that basket weave starting to develop. Start with your garter. Purl. Stockinette. Purl. And garter. So we can go ahead and count our V's again. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means I need one more row to get my 5th V. And then at that point you would go on and continue to switch back to, on this side, purling, stockinette, purling, to add this motif above this one. But I'm gonna go ahead and just do one more row, and then I'll show you how to cast off for this example. Okay, so I have 2 full sections. I could continue on with this for as long as I wanted to make this scarf as long as I wanted it to be, or whatever object I'm knitting. But just to show you how to cast off at this point, we are just gonna go ahead and do a regular cast off. So you would have the option of casting off in pattern if you want. But I think for these purposes, I'll just show you the easiest way to cast off. So at this point, you can go ahead and take any of your stitch markers out, and you'll go ahead and knit the first stitch and the second stitch. And then this is a crochet cast off. So we're just taking our first stitch that's on our needle, bringing it over the second stitch. Then we'll go ahead and knit another stitch, bring our first stitch over that second stitch. Knit a second stitch, first stitch over the second, and just go slowly. Try to keep an even tension. If it's too tight, it's going to be really hard to bring these stitches over the second stitch. It's really important to keep that second stitch nice and loose. First stitch over the second stitch. And you can see as we're going along, these stitches have been cast off. They form a nice little braid along the top. And you'll just continue until you only have one stitch left on your needle. So I'm down to my last 2 stitches. Go ahead and work them in the regular cast off. Now I only have 1 stitch, and that is where you can cut your work. And I'm not going to just to preserve this yarn, but you would cut your work and then you would pull this yarn through that remaining stitch to bind it off and pull tight, which creates a knot. So here we have our finished sample, and you could continue on with it for as long as you want to make your scarf as long as you want it. And eventually you will end up with a lovely, gorgeous, beautiful scarf. So thank you so much for watching today as we made this gorgeous, beautiful scarf. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. Again, I'm Abigail with Pinkstone Threads, and thank you so much for joining me today.